Oh.
So, hey, everybody on YouTube, we're just showing up.
Oh my gosh. And we're on
Wow.
Facebook now. Ah.
We're everywhere. All right.
Oh, we are just lost without Logan. Holy
Yep.
cow. Oh my
So,
God.
for
Need you,
those
Logan.
who,
We got a couple boomers trying to work StreamYard here.
I am too young to be a boomer.
I'm not a
kidding.
boomer.
I'm joking. I know Gen Xers take offense to that.
So, just to
Oh,
catch
God.
everyone up, for the past 10 minutes or so, we've been talking amongst ourselves thinking that we were live. We did actually run all of the things, but now we're here because normally Logan does these things, and Logan is preoccupied today with fixing a leak in his roof. And so without Logan, we've managed to capture the very precious time of Matt Culley to join us as a special guest.
And during those 10 minutes, we actually laid out exactly how to save vaping, but I just don't. No one heard it. I feel like the moment is lost. So.
And now I forgot what you said. So yeah.
I know.
It's just a once and done thing.
Oh my God, I can't. Yeah, we hit the play the. So nobody saw like the beginning intro or anything.
Nope.
Oh my Lord, and I feel like an idiot.
That's okay. We've got the other bumpers to play throughout the show, and yeah, we don't have to rehash the hey, how are yous.
Yeah, I mean, 5 minutes of it was just talking about weather. So
yeah, we're good. Y'all didn't miss much.
Oh my Lord, that was just okay.
So
we hit intro, but we forgot to hit start broadcast. So oh my God, it's so embarrassing.
Yep. Well, now that we're here, I guess it is probably time. Are you ready to run the bumper?
I'm hovered over it right now.
Okay, we'll do the legislative rundown.
Legislative rundown.
Just the one time.
This is going to be lost. This is going to be a comedy of errors. That's all I can say right now.
Well, I'll get right into it. Of course, the top priority item here is to stop this excise tax on safer nicotine products. We've, of course, brought this up, I think, at least two to 3 weeks in a row here. So if you haven't heard about this, there are lots of articles out there covering this, certainly from both sides promoting and opposing it. But this is a massive tax on all tobacco products, doubling the cigarette tax, something like a 2,000% increase on smokeless, and nicotine pouches are getting an extra tax here. All of this, of course, to bring all tobacco products up to the same level as cigarettes, which is not consistent with recommendations we've seen from other countries about how these products should be regulated. And of course, CASAA's position on all of this is that regulation should be proportional to risk. And of course, this massive hike in federal excise taxes does not achieve that. So anyway, go to CASAA.org, click on the Get Involved, and here, I'll just walk you through it just to make sure. Oh, wait, there we go. Get involved nationally, scroll down, and there you'll have it. Stop the federal excise tax. The other thing that I wanted to note here, I have no other active calls to action at this moment, but we are getting closer to things like Michigan and Denver, Colorado. So be on the lookout if you are in Denver or in Michigan. Be on the lookout this week. I'm anticipating releasing our alert for that. Both of those are flavor ban related. I will say I'm trying to not just rehash all of the points that we make in the calls to action that we've been putting out over the years for flavor bans. So it's a little bit more nuanced than it has been. in the wake of FDA not really doing their job. That was a bit of leverage for us, was to be able to tell council members, state lawmakers, look, FDA was granted the authority to regulate these products. They've indicated they may be authorizing flavored products. Let's let this system, no matter how horrible it is, run its course, and then start having these conversations about flavors at the state and local level. That has obviously changed with all of the marketing denial orders that have gone out, and a lot of these manufacturers stating that it feels a lot like a blanket ban on flavors, and I think we'll get into that a little bit later on. So all of that to say, that is my pretty much abbreviated legislative rundown.
That was a very abbreviated.
Yeah.
And sometimes I wonder if it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's like all these states are kind of holding back for the most part to see what happens federally. And
well, it is September, so most states are out of session. There's a handful that are sort of year round. New Jersey is one of them. I want to say, I think Pennsylvania is also pretty close to year. There's like a half a dozen states that are sort of year round. It seems kind of rare that we would see introduction of new legislation at this point. Sometimes weird things pop up in special session. But for the most part, this isn't the time of year we would expect to see a lot of things introduced. Okay. There are states that do pre-filing. So in December into January, we may see the states that allow pre-filing flavor ban bills. And also, in that vein, we do expect to see a lot of states cracking down on synthetic nicotine. There's a handful that already have some reference to synthetic nicotine in their statute somewhere. I think we talked about this last week or even the week before. Right. Synthetic is sort of a temporary, it's not even a fix. It's just sort of a workaround.
Well, then you have Montana, which doesn't meet again until 2023. So
that's awesome.
If you want to vape for the next year and a half and have nobody mess with you, just move on up here.
Move to Montana.
There you go.
All right. Well, thanks, Alex. So we're ready for our takes? Take
Get
3.
It.
That one worked. See, I'm used to doing, usually Logan does those, and I'm used to doing the overlays, which if you don't shut them off and hit hide, they keep replaying over and over. So I was hitting hide on that, and then it actually started playing it again on that first one.
Good job, Kristin.
By the time we're done, we'll have it all figured out.
Yeah.
And then thankfully Logan will be back someday. Oh, Lord.
So, getting right to, I guess I'll go first. Was that what we decided in the pre-show?
Yeah.
We drew straws.
Logan's not here. And Logan, if you're watching, we figured it out ahead of time for once.
This is the one time.
One time.
With a special guest that we figured it out.
His roof didn't really break. He just wanted to watch us all
crash and burn. Oh, boy.
So for my take this week, I'm picking up on a few things that Jacob Sullum has mentioned in his article. Let me get back to the blog here. So we've got the visual reference. There we go. Bureaucrats and politicians seem determined to cripple a life-saving alternative to smoking. Here we go. This is originally posted on reason.com. And of course, this is really, it's kind of an overview of how we got to where we are. It's a very brief kind of history of what the FDA is doing now, which is, I think many of the people who regularly tune into this are probably pretty aware of that. Sorry that you're all having to watch this advertising embedded in the article, but so it's sort of chronicling what's going on and where we are. But a couple of things that jumped out at me, and I think, maybe we're not talking enough about this. Maybe it's only us that are talking about this. But it is this appropriate for the protection health standard, appropriate for the protection of public health. And the quote here is, under that highly subjective standard appropriate for the protection of public health, which is mandated by the Family Smoking and Tobacco Control Act of 2009, it is not enough for a manufacturer to show its products are far less hazardous than conventional cigarettes. What kind of, sent me off on my tiny rabbit hole here was this subjective standard, which to me doesn't really feel like a standard. A standard, I think, is supposed to be determined by things like weights and measures. Let's look at some real numbers and develop a standard here. When people in the vaping community talk about a standards-based regulatory system, we're talking about, let's look at the liquids, let's see which ingredients are toxic or not toxic. Let's talk about thresholds. Let's talk about dosage, all of these things, and set some standards. Now, even under that scenario, I think, from a federal regulator point of view, they're trying to set standards that work for most people. There's always going to be people who are just inadequately served by certain standards, but that's a lot better than what we have now, which is this subjective standard of appropriate for the protection of public health, which is, I think, to the public is sort of loosely defined as the benefit for adults who smoke has to outweigh the risk to kids who might pick up nicotine. And of course, in fighting against vaping, fighting against having a fair regulatory system for vaping, we have all been focused on this youth crisis. And I'm coloring outside the lines of Jacob's article. Like I said, this is kind of an historical overview of what's been going on. But the thing that jumped out at me was, that thing where you buy a car and then you start to see your car everywhere. All of a sudden, everyone's driving the same car. So this is a real phenomenon. And I read a couple of articles about it just quickly. I'm by no means an expert on this, but the thing that came up was the invisible gorilla test. And I don't know if we didn't work it into the title, but I thought like the invisible smoker test would be probably a good title for this. And that in this experiment, what they did was they show study participants a video. And so they the video has a group of people, it's like a half a dozen people, and a few of them are wearing black t-shirts and a few of them are wearing white t-shirts, and they're passing a basketball amongst themselves. And the instructions to the person watching the video are pay attention to the people who are passing the basketball. And throughout the video, at some point, there's a person in a gorilla costume that kind of pops in and out of the frame or walks across the stage behind them. And at the end, the participants are asked, did you see the gorilla? And most, if not all, people didn't see the gorilla. They were paying attention to the people passing the basketball. And so I think that's a lot what's been going on here, when, of course, the public is being told, keep your eye on the youth vaping crisis. And even among kids, and Kristin and Matt, maybe you guys can talk about this a little bit with your experience as parents. I think when you ask a kid what's going on in school, what we hear, the anecdotes that we hear from teenagers is, well, everybody's doing it. And this is, when kids are put to the question, put the question of how many kids on a percentage basis, how many kids are vaping in your school, they all say like 60, 70, 80%. They seem to think it's everybody. So, the point being that these aren't reliable accounts. And I think most people in, the news consuming, the propaganda consuming public should, I don't want to make people feel uncomfortable about this, but to some extent, we can't even be confident that we're seeing the picture. That it doesn't matter that we can separate propaganda from actual science, but it's that we have this. I think it's confirmation bias. It has something to do with this, and so a lot of people out there are going to have a difficult time wrapping their heads around that. really we're only talking about what 4 to 5% of teenagers who are vaping regularly, and out of that, it's like 1% of kids who don't check any of the risk boxes. They're the never nicotine folks is actually incredibly low. So I that was just one thing that I picked up on and figured I'd offer it for my take. And I don't know if you guys wanted to jump in with your own experiences here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it also doesn't help that the visibility of smokers is less and less throughout the years because of different laws. You see less, even if at a bar, the smokers have to be 20, 30 feet away from the front door. So you just see it, what is there still 14, 15% smokers in this country? But
Yep.
Every time I see that data, I'm like, God, that's higher than you would even think, because you barely see people smoking anymore. And people are so embarrassed about their smoking habits that they're being a lot more discreet, even when, the laws don't tell them they have to be. So that's part of it. But and then we have, vaping epidemic thrown in our face, on the media every day. So obviously the general public is going to think one issue is much larger than the other.
Yeah, and what interestingly, you say you don't see it anymore. Well, I live in a small rural town, and I see it everywhere. It's a whole different.
Smoking cigarettes, you do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
I mean, I live in a small rural town too. I mean, I guess I'm kind of a homebody, but it just doesn't seem like you see it as much as
true.
you
Well, I mean,
used
you'll
to.
see it. Yeah, I mean, when I go to, say, a larger town like, say, Milwaukee or Madison or Green Bay, I'm in Wisconsin, can you tell? I don't see it at all. I mean, it's much less, and I think, unfortunately, again, sort of that invisible gorilla thing is people who live in large towns and don't see it all think, well, everybody's quit anyhow, and they have no idea what's going on not in their neighborhood. If they're not a white suburban mom and who doesn't see people smoking outside the yoga studio, it's they have no clue that this is still happening, and there's still plenty of adults who need these products.
And they're not connected to the deaths like you used to,
right.
Back in the day, I remember in the 90s, it's like everybody knew somebody that died from smoking. My grandpa died from smoking, but that's like happening less and less in certain areas.
Right.
Certain communities kind of have their own bubble, and in those, bigger cities, the blue cities, where they're kind of all in their own bubble. They don't even think about the fact that people are still dying, or if they are, they're just some rural local yokels, and we don't have to worry about them anyway.
Or in a poorer neighborhood, there's lots of communities who are still living with this every day, and they're just completely ignored because it's not a part of their life. And we brought this up before. As soon as a white teenager admits that they're vaping, from a rich suburb, all of a sudden it's an issue. Nobody cared that all these other people were dying from smoking, but their kid. And it's, and we talked about this before. I have teenagers. I've had teenagers. But I just recently had one who, she's 20. She just turned 20. But I remember when she was in high school, and for a teenager, everybody's doing it. It doesn't matter what it is. Everybody's doing it. I told Alex earlier, my teen told me that everybody in her class was bisexual. So I mean, probably not. They say everybody's got these designer jeans. Everybody's parents buys them a car. I mean, some of the stuff that you hear, and so, and I just laugh every time I see that in an article where they say, oh, I talked to my niece and she told me everybody's vaping in her school. And it's like, well, of course she's going to say that. And it is like what you said, that once you're looking for it, you see it, and you see it everywhere, and it seems like so much more than what it was. But and because I do vape, when I'm going to pick up my other daughter up at high school, and I'll see kids walking to school, and I see one or two occasionally who you can tell that something comes out, and you can tell they're vaping. They've got something in their hand, but the vast majority of them don't. But if you talk to the school, oh, it's probably this huge problem, although
Yeah.
I have not seen that. We have not gotten any notices coming home or anything like that. But again, the vast majority of these kids, their parents are smoking. They're not vaping, so they're more likely to end up smoking themselves unless their parents switch. But the people who smoke just end up being pushed aside because they're so hyper focused on, like Alex said, on these kids.
And the vagueness of the appropriate for the protection of the public health statement really chaps my ass, because how do you even weigh that? I mean, you're weighing smokers' deaths next to quote unquote nicotine addiction, really, nicotine dependence or habit, whatever you want to call it. But you're not even weighing the harm of what that dependence would be. You know what I'm saying? Like they just don't want any newer generations to become dependent on nicotine, and so they seem to be willing to throw away smokers' lives just for that blank slate of some utopia that's nicotine free that's never actually going to happen.
Yeah, well, as long as cigarettes exist, that's the part that gets me. It's like, okay, these cigarette companies aren't forced. They aren't under this requirement to prove that they're not going to generate any new consumers, and so they can. There's plenty of people, under 18 who are starting smoking. I think we said the other day it was like 200 a day become smokers. So they're not under any obligation to prove this, yet the vape companies have to prove that nobody who doesn't smoke already and who is an adult is going to try their product or use their product and become dependent on that product. And the irony is that they should be, that's exactly what the goal is. They should be having people use their product instead of starting smoking. There's teens, if 200 teens a day are becoming daily smokers, they should be, do you see what I'm saying? That's who, they should be stopping that. But instead they're saying, nope, let them become daily smokers. Let them smoke for 5-6 years until they're 21. And then they can have a tobacco flavored vapor product. I mean, what sense does that make?
Like you said, what really changed the game was when, it became an issue with the upper class kids. And because that, nicotine was kind of wiped out of that whole, group. And now that there's some, they're taking it up, that now it's a big problem. It's a very racist and classist view, because I think a lot of the elitist types are okay with the poor and the minority smoking and stuff, as long as it's not in their own communities.
Yeah, and to kind of cap things off a little bit here, I think you had mentioned about how we don't seem to talk about smoking as much anymore, and I think that's an observation I think folks in tobacco control have made, that we just don't see it like we used to. You don't walk into places and see people smoking. You can't smoke on transportation and this and that, and so a lot of people out there, I think, are a bit surprised to be hearing all this talk about tobacco in the 2020s, because I think they kind of figured, well, that problem has been solved depending on where you live. But 15% of the population smoking is still quite an issue.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's still like over 30 million people. So I mean, and again, 200 a day more every day. And until you stop that, to stop teens from vaping, to focus solely on that is just, it's just craziness, and there's that UK article too, where they were talking about how they look over at us in the US with our vaping epidemic and like, what are you talking about?
Well, this is unintentionally a good segue to your take. So,
yeah, and I was kind of up in the air if I wanted to talk about that UK one or if I wanted to talk about Durban and say it again,
Krishnamurthy.
And I think I'm going to go with them because they are perpetuating this idea about this teen epidemic, you know, and they intentionally misrepresent stuff. And I'm going to share my screen. You know, and here, I don't know if I want to share that one. Do I want to share that one or the other one? Let's do this one.
It was Durbin that actually put some numbers up, right?
Yeah. Do I have the Durbin one up now? Yeah. You know, and you know, we called him out on that because he purposely, well, first of all, it's hysterical that he calls out PMI for, you know, hiding their deadly history and causing kids to vape, and PMI doesn't even sell any vapes in the US. So there's that. But what he says, you know, and they're talking about how they're trying to switch over to more smoke-free alternatives and stuff. And he says, well, what this ad doesn't say is that 20% of kids use e-cigs compared with only 4% of adults. So don't be fooled. These products were developed for kids, marketed to kids, and being used by kids. And, you know, that is something that gives you that perception that way more kids use e-cigs than adults, you know, 20% of high school students. And in your brain, in most people's brain, when they read that, they're just going to see 20% of kids. That little high school is just this little HS there. That's kind of, you know, so he makes it sound like 20% of kids are just vaping away every day. They're regular vapors. And we know that's not true. It's more like 4.4% are daily, and that probably 80% of that 4.4% were already smoking. So, so he doesn't get into that. So get this, what does he not say, which is what we called him out on and said, well, what you're not saying is that 20% of high school kids equals about 4 to 4.5 million people. But that 3, what was it? 3? Now I got to find it.
I don't know. You did the numbers on this one.
Hold on. I got to find it on my thing.
I mean, it's not a small number. I want to make it clear that we're not trying to downplay this.
No. It's 3 million. Okay.
Yeah. 20%
of high school youth equals 3 million people, you know, which is a good number, but it's not more than the adults, because 4% or 4.5% really, which is now actually what the number is. Danielle had found that they're now saying that 4.5% adults are vaping, is 10.9 million. So there's more than 3 times as many adults vaping than high school youth.
And that 20% number is last, you know, anyone that took a puff in the last
just
month.
One puff. Whereas you've got that 10%, which the 10% or the 4%, 10 million, those are how many say that they vape. But, you know, there's something like 4 to 4.5 million who actually quit smoking with vaping. So that might be some dual users too. So, which dual use is a good thing. But they keep saying it's a bad thing.
One thing I will say just really quick while you're right there on that tweet, if you PMI, their marketing department needs to be talked to, because they should not have put the guy's picture on the little ad. He looks like a villain in a Marvel superhero movie.
Or like a James Bond.
And like, it's just, why would you even prop that guy up? Because everyone's going to think he's evil. And not even dig into what he has to say. Sorry, my marketing brain had to say that.
I don't have it in with them, so, you know, I have no idea if that's something that we could have any influence on. But yeah, but it's just the irony of his talking down his nose and his superiority and well, what you're not saying is 20% of kids, high school kids, use e-cigs compared with only 4% of adults, and these were, you know, but that number is completely hiding the truth. And the other one, and we got to call them out on this, you know, we really do. CASAA did come on, and CASAA's really been getting a little more snarky, which I know people will be happy to hear that, but we're still trying to be responsible. But and then the other one was Krishnamurthy's tweet, and in his, you know, it says this: e-cigarettes pose a huge threat to millions of Americans. They're the threat, you know. And again, you know, he does in the article, and I don't know if I can pull it up because it's in the Sun Times, and I'm over my quota, but he also, again, the the lack of any kind of compassion, you know, and that's what I was thinking about with the smoker, not thinking about people who smoke, and just kind of just sort of shrugging to the side. Well, adults can do what they want, you know, but this doesn't even really help people quit smoking. You know, I mean, that's what he essentially said. You know, it's like adults can make their own choices, even though there's simply no evidence that vapes help quit smoking. Outright lie.
He's blatantly lying. At least Durbin's like stretching the truth, right? which is, you know, that's how politicians
he told a version
work. Like,
of the truth.
You could take any kind of data set and kind of like, you know, spin it and make your own narrative out of it. But Raja is just blatantly lying.
Yeah. And I believe he also, the other thing he said was, let me find my, and he also implies, because in the article, he says something to the effect of, is it in the tweet? Actually, I'm not sure. Is that in the tweet? This is too small on my screen. I'll pull it up. Our kids are not for sale. They deserve our protection. Well, in the actual article, he says something to the effect of that 20% of kids are using this highly addictive product, you know, this highly addictive product. And really insinuating or implying that 20% of kids are addicted to this product. You know, he didn't say that, but the way the sentence is laid out is 20% of high school kids are using this highly addictive product. And it was so, oh, I'm back on the wrong one, but it was so, hold on, that one. It was just so blatant. But that statement of, you know, adults can do what they want, but there's no evidence, and just without any shred of irony or compassion, you know, I mean, that's such a sneering, well, adults can do what they want, but, you know, you're idiots because there's no evidence that it's helping you. I mean, and just all of our testimonials and all of the studies that we have, the Cochrane review, you know, I mean, yeah, his was an outright lie, and we need to make sure we're calling them on this, and getting, you know, CASAA has an entire section, and maybe this might be a good moment. I'm going to wrap it up with this. I'm going to pull up the CASAA site and show you guys here. We have a couple different things. We have our facts section, you know, frequently asked questions, that talks all about harm reduction and how they can reduce their risks, about electronic cigarettes. Does it cause seizures? Is there any evidence that vaping helps adults quit smoking? And, you know, it says, you know, this is just a short thing, but there's a link here that says read more here. And it takes you to a study. And if you go under our resources and you go into our information library, you'll see just a ton of stuff. I mean, God, Danielle, I love you so much. They just did an awesome job with this site. But go down to youth usage, and here's all the studies here. And if you look up here, this link can be copied and shared to get right down to this section. And we do need to update this because I believe we have a few more studies that have just come out as far as, you know, do they help people quit smoking? Do they help, you know, here's all the stuff about high school students. So, you know, use that and call them out on this and let them know that they can't get away with this anymore, you know, and I've just about had it. And, you know, it's hard to still want to keep playing nice when they're just so blatantly lying and or using what Durbin did, which they've been doing since day one of, oh, there's toxic chemicals. Well, how much? You know, it's like it's stating the truth, but not the whole truth, or a version of the truth that fits their agenda. And we've got to keep calling on it. So as advocates, don't be shy, call them out on this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's their game to use coercion and to get what they want and to create fear about stuff. And I mean, they've been doing it for as long as my adult life. I mean, look at how scared they got us all of terrorism, so we would have the Patriot Act and stuff like that. You know, they overblow a lot of the, not saying those aren't serious issues, but they overblow it to get you get scared and be okay with giving certain things up.
Now, this is an interesting question. Daytime Frank says, the thing is, how many kids are actually using the product they depict? They really use pods and disposables.
So
Yep.
well,
Go ahead.
I mean, there's a lot of things I think to talk about that. But while you were talking, Kristin, about the numbers, and this relates to Daytime Frank's question as well. I'm going to pop my screen in here. Do I have the right thing? So there was an article that flew by on Twitter. This is written by Dave Morris. You may know him as Dave Gravy Morris on the Twitters. And one of the things that he mentioned here, and I haven't been able to independently verify this or anything like that, so I will just sort of give you the kind of pre-warning here that I haven't verified this. This is really his experience that's being reported here. But while he was attending a meeting with the Arizona Attorney General's office, someone who represented the AG's office noted that over half the products used among Arizona youth were vaping products that contained THC. And so this is another known. Whenever you look at those shots of like, the high school principal's desk drawer where he keeps all the contraband, there's a certain percentage of those that all of us can easily identify as THC cards. But it's, this has been a problem, not just, in terms of people not knowing the differences, the different products, but also the survey instruments that are being used to gather all this data, that question about THC versus nicotine has sort of come and gone. And there's not really any reliable measurement of how many kids are just vaping THC and how many are vaping nicotine. And of course, they're both vaping. So if you ask, this is something that years ago was brought up to people administering these surveys, that if you just ask kids about vaping, then there's no distinction between THC and nicotine. Also, the whole thing about Juul. So you have to ask them, product specific questions. And more to Daytime Frank's question, this was something in Danielle's very excellent latest installment of the Master Settlement Agreement videos. She noted one of the quotes. This is one of those things we actually have a recording of. Someone from a school board, I believe, was talking about how these payments would be divvied up, or how much of this is Juul actually responsible for, and they're going off of inaccurate numbers about market share, and they're saying, well, Juul is apparently 80% has an 80% market share. So we just assume that 80% of the products that we're confiscating are Juul, and they're not. I mean, it's like maybe 20%, and it seems that Juul has been featured in these pictures less and less over the past couple of years. I know Stefan Didak, who some of us know, and he has his Stefan Didak has been posting these pictures up and pointing out that Juul actually makes up a actually small portion of what's actually being confiscated. Just to throw those little tidbits out there, hopefully that contributed something.
Yeah, and the actual statement, what did he say? He said, the thing is, how many kids are actually using the products they depict? They really use pods and disposables. And if you look at those confiscated devices, you see a whole broad range. I see just as many mods and bottles of liquid, and there's pods and disposables, but it's not just that. But here's the thing. It's not that widespread. Just remember that 20%, the vast majority of them just took a puff off a friend's device. So you can't start pointing fingers and saying, well, it's all Juul's fault. It's all this, the what is other puff bar fault. It's all their fault that we have this vaping epidemic. No, there is no vaping epidemic. And so when you start doing that and agreeing, oh yeah, it's all Juul's fault, it's all their fault, you're blaming them for something that's just an exaggerated phenomenon. And that yes, a lot of kids did try it. And, we had to watch that. Was it a trend? Was it just a trendy thing to do? But the vast majority of the kids, they didn't go out and buy the product, because I see bricks and mortars people trying to blame online sales and online sales, blaming the convenience stores, and they're all just, you know, throwing the blame on each other and throwing each other under the bus, when really the kids aren't even buying them in vast amounts. They're getting one and 10 of them share it, you know, and they probably got it from their older brother who brought it legally. So who are you going to blame for that? Are you going to blame the store or the online who sold it to a legal person and then gave it to the younger kids, who then 10 or 15 of them took a puff off of it, and now they say, yes, I had a puff in the past 30 days. You know, so stop throwing each other under the bus over this stuff too, because that drives me crazy.
I'll add, I had the opportunity to speak to someone who is a middle school principal, and one of the things he mentioned was that I don't know how frequent it is, but he has on several occasions received a call at the end of the day from a parent who says, hey, apparently you confiscated my mod from my kid. Can I have it back? And so that's, you know, just like I stole cigarettes, kids are stealing vapes. And that's, you know.
I actually had to do that.
Yeah. So there you go. I mean,
my daughter took mine and I was like, can I get that back? Because she took mine, you know. But yeah, that was, and I've told the story about why she was using it. And boy, I'm like, really? Really? You're going to do this to me? And then she was homeschooled. Matt, that was my take. Would you you don't have a screen up, so you'd like Alex to pull up that thing? Matt's graciously agreed to do a take for us today too.
I'll do a take.
He's going to throw a take out there.
You want the graphic?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Here we go.
Oh, I'm not seeing it. Oh, there it is. All right. My take is that, and I might make this extra wordy, so my apologies. I think that I think that the advocates in the vaping space need to read the room, so to speak, and they need to understand that this isn't the Trump years anymore. It's a different political climate, and you know, during the Trump presidency, a lot of us, even if we didn't like Trump, you use the right arguments and you make the case, you know, to what you think is going to resonate for those people. Now that, you know, Republicans are don't have the House or the White House, and Democrats are running the show, you got to change your arguments. Even if you hate Democrats and you think that they're all evil, you still need to change your arguments up and figure out what resonates with them. And that's where we really need to focus on what, you know, underserved communities, whether it be the LGBT community, people of color, you know, how much certain things can affect them. And when we do graphics like this, like Danielle made this really great graphic showing, you know, lesbian, gay, and bi smoking, and trans smoking, and then cisgender smoking, and transgender vaping, so on and so forth. A few people seemed, you know, the All Lives Matter crowd seemed to jump in and they were like, you know, what about all of us vapors? This doesn't just affect the LGBT community. That's not really the point. You need to make points that resonate with politicians, and this is definitely one of them. So what I'm saying is it's time to suck it up, take your own political beliefs out of it, and play the game. That's what you have to do when you're going to be an advocate. You know, and cannabis has been really successful with that, where they've made friends on both sides of the aisle, and they've, you know, even though it could be looked at as more of a progressive issue, they still seem to be pretty neutral politically and just make the right arguments for the audience that they have. So that's basically what I'm getting at. So far, a lot of advocates have not been doing a good job, and they seem just, you know, still stuck in, you know, the Trump days, and they haven't realized that it's time for them to morph a bit and to you know, mutate into a different argument. Right. Am I making sense?
Yeah. And just to,
I'm going to close this.
just
Bring us
to,
back up.
oh, sorry. Yeah. And just to speak to, I think maybe some of those comments that, the All Lives Matter comments and so on. I mean, this graphic is pretty specific in making it clear that, we are talking about communities that smoke at higher rates than the rest of the population. And the motivating factors, the underlying factors for why these communities smoke more is, a much deeper problem. But I think in terms of, when we're talking about harm reduction, we really do need to be, I think, focusing more on, what other solutions are going to work. We can't fix all of society's problems right now, but we do have the technology and the science to at least give people less harmful options, because we know that people are going, drug use has been with humans for thousands of years. And it's, certainly a way for people to, it's a way for people to enjoy themselves. And it's a way for people to escape the realities of their situation that are soul crushing and dangerous and harmful and all of those things. And so as a coping mechanism, we have probably unprecedented access to all kinds of drugs. And so all of that to say, we know that people are going to do these things no matter what. And it's no longer viewed as good policy, I think, by and large, at least with cannabis. But it's no longer viewed as good policy to punish these people for just trying to feel better. And so that's why this particular graphic focuses on the LGBTQ plus community. Even within, we have other subsets of people who experience life in different ways. And some of us turn to substance use in order to deal with this. And yeah, I'm just going to repeating myself here. But.
And that graphic should be a gut check for all of us, because if you look, I mean, there's did any of us know that there were over 20%, what is it? 21.3% of the trans community vapes. I mean, that's huge. And why aren't there more trans people in vape groups on Facebook? Why are we, not like maybe trying to reach out to more in these community and be more inclusive? Do they maybe feel, not unsafe, but what's the word I'm looking for? Uncomfortable in the community we have right now, because it's mostly, white guys with big beards. So
and welcome would probably be a good.
Yeah, welcome. Yeah, so
unwelcome.
We need to be unwelcome. Yeah, they feel unwelcome. So we need to be welcoming to these different groups, and remember that it's a big tent. Smokers come from all walks of life, and we need to invite anybody that's interested in tobacco harm reduction under the tent, and all work as one.
It's one of those things. I kind of feel like this is me living that kind of pie in the sky dream here, but I always have that little voice in the back of my head that says, if we can solve this, I think we can solve everything else, because of the big tent, because this crosses political boundaries and all of the other boundaries. Everybody, not everybody, but smoking affects everybody. It doesn't matter where you come from. It affects some people more, of course, but it's just across all of the lines. And I feel, and that's one of the what I've always hoped was sort of the promising thing about the vape community. You can have some ultra conservative person standing at the counter at a vape shop, and the biggest hippie liberal in the world walks in and says, I want to quit smoking. And they will both put their political differences aside and swap stories about how vaping helped them. And so to me, I feel like that's kind of the linchpin in all of this stuff. I know I'm wrong, but hey, a boy can dream.
Okay. Well, I'm monitoring the comments here, and I'm putting this one up. Not to call it out, but because I'm not sure the tone of that. I'm not sure if they're asking us, well, are you just worried about this, or are you going to get to talking about these laws and stuff? Or if he's saying to vapors and advocates, hey, what are you more worried about, who's vaping or smoke? But I think the point got lost here along the way, because I don't know if we veered off here. But the point is that we're gay, LGBTQ issues are very big in the left-leaning Democratic sphere. Okay. And so what we're trying to say is that we do have to take that into account. You know, if we're talking to people who are very right-leaning, you may talk about things like individual freedoms and things like that. Whereas on the left, you may be talking more about my body, my decision, the fact that this is affecting the people that the left is often talking about, which is LGBTQ,
War on drugs,
people, drug, ending the war on drugs. Those are all hot topic issues for them. So what we're trying to say is screaming at people who lean that way about, you know, individual freedoms and certain things that just kind of, they don't resonate with them that would have resonated with Trump and, or, you know, back then. And that's what Matt was trying to say is that,
yeah, tailor your message. Like
yeah,
in Montana, I've talked to Democrats and Republicans, and those conversations go much differently depending on which politician I'm talking to. And you know, you read the room, really. That's all what it comes down to.
Yeah, going all in there, you try to think about the things that will appeal to those people is what we're trying to say. And yeah, this is very interesting because somebody did bring that up and said in the chat and said something to the effect of, well, didn't that all kind of go out the window with the menthol bans, because that's all about protecting these people, you know, the LGBTQ people and the lower income and Black people and, you know, people of color in general. And so that's a good point. And we need to kind of counter that and say, look, that's the way you're looking at it. You want to get them to stop smoking. Well, you need to support this vaping for exactly the same reason. And that's the argument you want to give them. You don't want to go up to them and say, you know, I have a right to vape, you know, or, you know, regulation's stupid or whatever arguments we were using 2 years ago.
Well, you know, yeah, I mean, with Republicans, it was like, you know, we don't want to hurt small businesses. You know, it's a freedom issue, and they tend to be friendlier with, you know, tobacco related issues. But yeah, I mean, with the menthol stuff, it's like what I've told a few Democrats is like, you know, it's not going to go away. There's going to be black markets, and who's going to get arrested selling menthols on the street? It's not going to be a middle class looking white guy.
Yeah. And we'd love to get, you know, I mean, Janine's saying right here that she's a member of that, you know, LGBTQ community, and she felt a bit shy in the vape community at first, but she's learned it's a very welcoming community. And that's great. And I don't think anybody's trying to say that vapors are intolerant in that effect. It's just that vapors, just like any other Americans, run the gamut from far left to far right. And those of us who are on the far right need to now kind of maybe shift on how we're talking to the public. Just like when Trump was in office, those of us on the far left kind of had to shift to trying to figure out what is going to appeal to this guy, what is going to appeal to the other people in power with him. Same thing now with Biden and the people who are in power with him. How are we going to appeal to them? How are we going to communicate with them where they're not just going to shut down immediately because they're thinking I'm talking to a nut?
You know, I will say my impression and my experience is I like talking to Republican lawmakers has always been relatively easy because they very, very quickly pick up the mantle of championing small business. And so for them, this is very much a business. It's very strange to me to see, you know, Republican lawmakers in DC making arguments in support of harm reduction for nicotine, and yet opposing, you know, changing policies for cannabis or other drugs.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's it's sort of that there's that disconnect on both sides, right?
Yeah, and both sides are very contradictory and hypocritical when it comes to harm reduction and drug policy. Yeah,
for sure. And the other thing I think I was going to bring up, you know, the comment that we showed, I think was sort of talking about how, you know, we need to do the same commenter, Joe, was talking about, you know, we need to be lobbying and all of this. This is part of that. This is part of developing those messages to lawmakers and being able to appeal to different lawmakers based on their political stripes. And when we talk about communities like the LGBTQ community who have been through their own horrendous levels of discrimination and actual structural violence. This community was rocked by HIV/AIDS, and of course, society's first reaction to that was, of course, not understanding the issue, but also isolating people with HIV/AIDS, stigmatizing people with HIV/AIDS. The entire gay community was stigmatized because of HIV/AIDS, and of course, this contributed to people. I think more promotion of sort of abstinence-only approaches to sexually transmitted diseases, and so, here is a group of people who have been. I don't like using the word victim, but in this case, I think it's kind of true. A community that has been victimized by policies that are not open to this idea of meeting people where they're at. And here we are again. Instead of having a critical conversation about how harm reduction can help in this instance, not just with smoking, but with all substance use, now these people are being hit once more with promotion of abstinence-only policies that we know throughout history do not actually result in some sort of net benefit. And if anything, there is a net harm here. So I think that's one of the reasons why we highlight this. And I think we are encouraging other people to highlight the disparities, how these policies are negatively affecting everyone, but in particular, a lot of these groups that could benefit from other strategies.
Okay, well, Joe kind of clarified. He says, I get what you're saying about the demographics, but that has no impact on the decision when it comes to vaping. It's big tobacco that has thrown money at the states, and now they want to be repaid. The states now feel obligated to shut vaping down for their past compensation. We need to band together and use our passion and most of all money to get the same results. Politicians only speak money, and we as an industry have more than enough. A lot to unpack there.
Yeah, I don't look. I mean, we could spend the rest of this podcast talking about each one of those points. I kind of don't want to go down that rabbit hole. It's certainly things that have been discussed internally. There have been multiple opportunities over the past 10 years for the industry to come together and fund an effort. I know, without naming names, as far as anything that's ever come out of the vaping community, there was a very well-funded effort over the past few years. And that organization was able to file successful lawsuits on behalf of manufacturers because those are the ones who have standing, not us, the manufacturers. Got the vape, the flavor ban, the first attempt at a flavor ban in New York was held back until the legislature passed it in the middle of the night. That bought the industry here a year. That has certainly been tried. And I think, one of the things that, unfortunately, the biggest success of the way that FDA is enforcing the rules, the biggest success of the anti-vaping, anti-smoking activists is that they've sort of taken they've chopped the industry off at the knees. If you can reduce the amount of product that any of these companies can sell, then you're reducing the amount of money they can contribute toward changing policy. And so now more than ever, it is much more challenging to raise that money because we're going to see so many businesses exiting the space.
Already seeing it.
And I don't know how many people have just sort of soured on the whole effort. I hope not. I mean, anyway, like I said, we could go on and on and on and talk about this. I don't want that to be the rest.
And keep in mind that we're coming at this from a consumer advocate viewpoint. We don't have the same kind of resources as the industry does, and although we do get a lot of support from the industry, but that's not anywhere near what would be needed to fight this with money, as you put it. And I'm just going to say that the tobacco industry is not our biggest enemy. I mean, and they have nothing to do with getting paid back the money that they put in from the MSA. So I think you're kind of off base with that.
Yeah, actually, I mean, when we talk about, and I've talked to people that work for tobacco companies and about this in particular with how the MSA affects them, the sort of strategy behind MSA and the Tobacco Control Act was sort of this slow, managed decline in smoking prevalence. And so these massive corporations factor that in. they are prepared to be losing sales of cigarettes, year over year and so on. And, in the case of Altria, they're somewhat diversified. I think they own Kraft Foods, or they did at one point. You just saw, was it PMI got into the medical device space by acquiring a company that does, inhalators, and so on. And so, the companies are prepared for this. They don't need to crush small business in order to kind of get an edge on things. But I will say, there is some overlap in kind of the policy and regulatory goals that we have with what incumbent tobacco companies want. Maybe they got the biggest safe harbor out of the Tobacco Control Act, right? They've insulated themselves from competition there. That's the best thing that anybody could have given to a tobacco company. So they've already got the advantage. But I will say, there are friends until they aren't, and that's life. That's not special to tobacco products.
One more point worth mentioning too on fundraising is that part of what makes this community over the years really great and cool is also made it harder to raise funds, and that's having thousands of businesses. If there were only 50 vape companies in the whole world, it would be a lot easier to raise funds, and you could kind of pressure them more. But when you have thousands of independent vape shops, independent manufacturers, it's harder to get everybody to pay their fair share, towards the advocacy efforts.
Well, a lot of them are just they're living by. I mean, we didn't get hundreds of millionaires in this industry. I mean, you've got a lot of people with very small margins who are just barely making a living, and a few big ones that like Juul and other Views and Blue that actually started booming. Some bigger liquid companies, I would say like three. The one out in California with all the black bottles. They're like a bigger company. Johnson, is it Johnson something in Wisconsin here? They were distributing all over the country. Liquid, and there's some bigger liquid companies, but all these they were so separate, and there were all these little mom and pop shops. A lot of them were just barely keeping their head above water. So, and they were trying to undercut the internet, and it wasn't.
They could all give $50 a month or something. It's just harder to ever catch up with those people. Like, for example, in the gun industry, if you're going to be a gun manufacturer, you have to be giving X amount of dollars to the NRA. Right? Or you're just going to get called out and put on the hot seat, and people aren't going to buy from you because you're not helping pitch into. It's more in your face. Trying to get thousands of shops throughout the country to give the little bit here and there is just way more difficult.
And that variety is what made this product work, and these different approaches to it. But unfortunately, that variety also made it very hard for people to agree on what they were going to agree to as far as regulation, because you had the online people, you had the bricks and mortar people, you had the people who only bought liquid, you had the people who made their own liquid, and sold in house, and that made it really hard for them to come together and agree on, this is what we're going to do and this is what we're going to agree to. You had people who were like, no regulation at all, we shouldn't have any regulation, so it wasn't one just issue. People say, oh, it's just vaping. No, it's a whole bunch of different kinds of vaping and kinds of products and kinds of business models. And that did make it hard for the industry. So, I mean, I'll give them that.
So are we, I feel like we're skirting on the edge of a segue into the deep dive here. Is that, are we ready to move on?
Good segue for
I think
that.
So.
Let's do it.
So I chose for today's topic, and I saw the comments in the stream, and I know we all have a tendency to do a lot of choir preaching, but this is out there in the world, and I always cross my fingers that somebody not familiar with vaping or not in the vaping community stumbles across these conversations, and hopefully they gain a little bit of perspective. So while we are all talking about the manufacturers the individual manufacturers getting MDOs and the liquid coming off the market, I thought we should talk about what else we're losing in all of this. So just from my notes here.
That was a good segue. Then we were talking about vape shops. That actually worked out really well.
Yeah, it did. And of course, and you brought up, the diversity of products and flavors and all of this, the ability for people to customize their experience and get what they want and discover the advantages of vaping over smoking. All of that is all very, very important. And that is, of course, here's kind of the issue that everybody sees, right? You see companies getting shut down for this and that, but it's the larger picture, which includes the community. It includes the retail environment. It includes, in a way, this sort of culture shift from the culture around smoking, which is, pushing people across the street into dark alleys and the margins of society, versus what happened in the vaping community, which was people coming together in a vape shop and sharing stories and supporting one another. So I figured, this isn't by any means, this isn't an ode or obituary to the vape shop. I think there is, I think this is more of, underscoring how important that is to the success of these products and the broader success of tobacco harm reduction. And so I figured we'd start with maybe a little roundtable of, our early experiences with vape shops and how we, all maybe came to the similar conclusions that I'm saying with my mouth here. And so if we don't, I think we might be able to go in order of adoption here. Kristin, not only are you one of the longest serving members on CASAA, but I believe between the three of us, you switched to vaping before either Matt or I. So would you maybe take us on a little tour of what it was like back in the day?
Holy cow. Well, so long ago. Let's see if I can remember. Well, when we first started, there was no vape shops. They didn't exist. And
what year?
2009.
All
right.
When
I bought our first one. Yeah, it was late 2009. We went to we went to a booth at the Wisconsin State Fair, and this guy was selling VIP, I think they were called. Your basic cigalikes with white with the tan filter that popped in and the orange light at the end. I think we spent for 2 kits well over $200. Within a week or two, those carts either didn't work or dried up, and so I found myself on ECF trying to figure out how I was going to refill these and get different flavors, because the tobacco flavor just tasted like my dad's pipe tobacco smelled. Didn't taste like smoke. It just reminded me of the smell of tobacco, like pipe tobacco, and sweet, which was weird. But yeah, there was no shop. And then we moved up to north central Wisconsin to this small town. I was living in Milwaukee. And so it took quite some time to get a vape shop here. The first vape shop I think we saw was 2000. I want to say, because there was one already by 15. I want to say maybe 2013, and it was an hour away. There was one an hour away in Wausau, and I think there might have been a couple either in Appleton or Green Bay by that point, which were bigger cities about an hour away from us. We've only got about less than 9,000 people live in my town. So, and we did get a vape shop. I want to say in 2015 is when the vape shop opened up here. He actually lived in Appleton, and his parents lived here, and he helped them open up the shop. And ironically, I don't think his mom ever quit smoking. But the first vape shop opened up, and they were gone within a matter of months. They weren't in the best location either, and they just had limited stuff. I swear it looked like kids. I mean, well, everybody looks like kids to me these days. You guys look like kids even with the gray hair. But that one didn't last very long. It seemed more like geared towards the devices and like mods and stuff. Very limited. just a tiny little place. And then the other vape shop opened up, better parking, all that kind of stuff. And he seemed to be a little more, I mean, still looked like, a man cave. I don't know why they all end up looking like man caves, black leather and posters and stuff. I never understood how that always seemed to be the case, that all these vape shops look like that. He didn't have glass or anything back then. But it was nice because, I got to know him, and I think we finally connected on social media first before we actually met at the vape shop, since he lived about 2 hours away. And we've actually done some stuff together as far as advocacy and meeting in Madison, and when they were doing that budget thing where they're trying to tax it with the budget. And yeah, I guess I never, because I did this for so long, I never really got into the whole vape shop community, I guess. I mean, I didn't go hang out there and vape, but I mean, I would go in and I would see people there doing that. And a lot of older people. I mean, there were some younger people sitting on the black leather couch, but there's always some heavy metal or something on the TV. But for the most part, when I go in there was older people and they were helping. And then that was the nice thing, was that you could go in and you could ask for certain things. When my aunt, when she moved up with us, she was still smoking. And I finally got her to buy a disposable, and she tried that. And then she said, well, it's too bad you can't recharge these. And so we got a rechargeable one. And then one day we stopped at an Appleton vape shop and said, we're just going to jump in and grab something. And she's like, can I come in too? And she walked out with this shiny red mod, later on, and he was really great walking her through it and stuff like that. And I think that if that vape shop hadn't been there where she could walk in and kind of handle them and look at them, I don't think she ever would have, gone online and ordered something. And she certainly wasn't going to find it at Walmart, and we've tried some different liquids and stuff that we really wouldn't have otherwise. I mean, a lot of the liquids I had tried, well, for a long time, it was just Drew's stuff, Drew Gleam, he used to be on the board, and it's because of him, I probably, if it wasn't for him, I never would have bought a mod. But he, and then, going to vape like meats and stuff, we tried a lot of different stuff. But when you couldn't do that, all the time, fly to Virginia or something, having that vape shop there and being able to try the stuff I use now, I use because that vape shop was there, and I was able to try it, and I liked it. So yeah, it was really important, is that, it was a somebody I knew in town who I knew I could contact as far as from the advocacy stuff, and someplace to go if I needed coils on the fly, or if I needed, if my tank broke, or, I don't want to wait for 3 days for it to get here. Actually, here, stuff that says 3 days takes more like 5 days to ship. So yeah, and then, more and more of those you can't get shipped to you anymore. So yeah, that's my vape shop experience. Did I go on too long about that? I apologize.
That's okay. No, I mean,
it's a long story with me.
I think it's, it's the back in the day thing, and 2013 is sort of consistent, I think, with my experience. Now, Matt, I don't know when you switched to vaping. I think we switched pretty close to each other.
Well, the first time I ever tried it was 2009.
Oh, okay.
But I was bartending back then, and there was this group of people. I'm pretty sure they weren't from this area, but we have a lot of tourists here in the summer, and they had like these little cig-alike devices, and they had a little card to show you, like, tell you what it was, basically like just to say, hey, it's okay that we're going to use this inside your bar. And I let them. I didn't care. It was like you remember those cig-alikes? It was just like a little tiny little wisp of vapor. And then I was smoking outside, and one of the gals that was using it was out there, and like I tried it, and I thought, maybe there's something here, but it seems pretty weak, and doesn't really give me that same, satisfaction as a cigarette. Then in 2012, we had the first vape shop I had seen popped up. It was kind of like a mall, vape shop that's charged way too much for these devices, that they were like demoing them. I remember one had like a wire on it connected to like a battery pack or something. Like you could like put the battery pack in your pocket, and you had a wire on this little,
like one of those old mobile phones where you got the shoulder strap.
Yeah. And I tried it there too, and like, I was like, oh, these things are getting better, but God, they're so expensive. It's like $200 for like a kid. It was crazy. And then I finally went into my first proper vape. No, I bought the blue later in 2012 from like a Walgreens. Thought, it's getting better. I like this cherry flavor quite a bit, but I still hadn't completely gotten away from smoking. And around that same time, I also got oral cancer from smoking. And so I'm like really thinking harder about quitting. And then in 2013, beginning of 2013, there was like a proper vape shop that popped up here that had like all the stuff, that was popular at the time. Liquids, just had everything. And that's when like, the first time I went in there, I bought a kit, but my eyes were opened. That's when I really started going down the rabbit hole and, researching vape and watching YouTube videos and really like got deep into like the hobby side of it. And I easily quit smoking around that time. But then, I went to the vape shop a few times and I quickly found out, well, there's this online world and I can start buying stuff and having it shipped. And there's devices that I can't get locally. And it's just kind of, all escalated from there.
Well, I've told my story so many times. I'm almost bored with it. But so the first time I saw a vapor product was in a truck stop on I-78. I was on my way to New York City from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I used to run vans all over the place, and I smoked. I was a pack and a half maybe at that point. It was after rehab, and I think I'd used nicotine gum for a while and had gotten down to about a pack a day. But I was a 2-pack a day smoker for most of my smoking experience. And I saw these, the fake electric cigarette things. And I remember sitting in my car and seeing a truck driver in the cab of the truck, puffing on, or like I would see this little blue light kind of, come up every now and then. I was like, oh, that guy's using an e-cigarette. And at the time, I say it was probably late 2008, early 2009. I can't remember. I remember hearing about the Tobacco Control Act and this thing is happening. And also that trucking companies are starting to prohibit drivers from smoking in the cabs because it does actually devalue the company's property, which I think is sort of one argument for it. The other was, improving the health of their employees. So immediately my brain went to like, oh, this is just some gimmick for truck drivers. And that's why I'm seeing it at a truck stop. And that's why they're using it. They're trying to get around the smoking ban that the company's laid down. And so that I just dismissed it. And it wasn't until 2013, after I saw someone using the products that, this guy smoked as much as I did, if not more, that I figured, I should give it a shot. And so when I started looking around about, how do I buy these things, even in, North Jersey, there weren't really a lot of vape shops. And I got my first products from 2 different gas stations. I got the Logic Mint and the Enjoy King tobacco flavor. I learned how to use the products after I figured like I was failing. I went on YouTube, Grim Green. I've told him a couple of times I'm one of many people who tell him that he saved my life. All these things. He's the reason why I'm even involved in CASAA. But at the time, there was, in watching this videos, it was like, oh wait, there's vape meets and people getting together. And I think I saw something from 2011 and I was like, wow, like maybe I should go to one of these things. I don't like being around a lot of people, but this is probably interesting. So I started looking for vape shops and there just wasn't anything around. I mean, that after that first weekend of the Cigalikes from gas stations, the only other place I could find maybe a different product was in a head shop on Route 17 in New Jersey. If you're familiar with The Sopranos, that's also where the Bada Bing is located, on Route 17. So I went there and I think Green Smoke was what they had. And I have no idea what the nicotine content was, but I'm confident it was higher than whatever I had bought from Logic or Enjoy, because I felt, my face got hot, my heart rate started racing, just from, a little dinky Cigalike. And so just looking around in the area trying to find a vape shop, there were shops in the city Vape New York. I don't know if it was Vape New York at that time. I remember they had a location out in Flushing, Queens. And it was, for me to get, I was just across the river. I could see the New York City skyline out the front window of our apartment. But, to get to Flushing, Queens, it's like you've got to take, the little jitney vans, and you've got to catch another bus. You got to get to Port Authority, and then you got to get on a train, and you got to transfer, and then you're there. It's like 45 minutes later. And I'm like, this is just not worth it. But I did find out later on, Smokeless Image, who was the first company I bought a starter kit from, they were supposed to open a shop in Hoboken, and they wanted to have vaping indoors. So they went and they applied for like a cigar lounge license. Well, in New Jersey, there's a set number of cigar lounge licenses, and they couldn't get one. And so they had to delay opening, and all of this to say, I didn't have my first real walk into a vape shop experience until like a year later, I think. Dan Donahue, he runs Good Karma Vapor in New Jersey and has been a supporter of CASAA, all around friendly guy, and has been in this for years. I think he's been doing this for as long, if not longer, than I have. Actually, he opened up a shop based on me like reading a local ordinance to him, and he was like, "Oh, it's not that bad." So I flash forward like 8 years later, 8 years later, Dan, I'm sorry I ever talked you into this. This is absolutely horrible. But Dan's shop is where I ended up kind of going to hang out. I'd take my lunch break up there. And that was where I saw people walking in off the street who were smoking and walking up to the counter saying, my wife, doctor, friend, this and that said, maybe I should give vaping a try. Does this stuff work? And you've got, 3 people sitting on the couch, the people behind the counter, and inevitably somebody jumps up and is like, yeah, man, like this totally worked for me. Here's what I'm using. You can do this too. And so that immediately struck me as one of the most valuable features of the vape shop. The other story that I just want to relay, since we're reminiscing about how cool vape shops were, and still are in some places. We were all hanging out one day, and a mom walks in, and I think she had her like 15 or 16-year-old kid in tow, and she had this look on her face that was just like, it is that slow burning mom rage kind of face. You just know this person is serious. And I think everybody kind of puckered up a little bit and thought, oh my God, this is going to be ugly. And the folks behind the counter kind of looked at her and said, may I help you, ma'am? And she was like, she explained that her son was smoking and that she didn't know what to do about it. And she figured that maybe getting him a vapor product would be a good way to go. And I think everybody's response is sort of like, okay, if you can get your son to go wait in the car and come back out and come back in, we'll talk about what maybe we can help you out with. But, nobody's making any kind of cessation claims or anything like that. But that was surprising. And since then, of course, I think all of us have probably heard from parents, everything from, there was a woman that was next to us at a vape show, and she had talked about how she was able to get her kid off of ADHD drugs just by using nicotine. I mean, the drugs were not doing great things for him, but just, by being able to use nicotine, it managed his symptoms. He was able to function in school again and didn't have to deal with the side effects of the prescription drugs. So that's just one example. So anyway, I went through the same thing you did, Kristin. I spent a lot of money on trying to figure out what I was going to use eventually. And, I spent $450 in my first 2 weeks trying to set up. I landed on a couple of ego spinners or ego twists and a tank mod. I can't even remember the name of it now, but it was really cool and science fiction-y because it had the milliliter markings on the side. And so it was, it took a while for me to actually get the opportunity to say on a panel to Matt Myers, if I had the opportunity to visit a vape shop in 2013, there's no way I would have spent that much money. I would have been able to have that conversation with somebody behind the counter and be set up, for maybe $100. and that would have been a lot more helpful than me just trying to poke around on the internet and see what's good.
Right.
Yeah,
I actually forgot that first vape shop that I mentioned that was in Wausau, an hour away, was actually a tobacco smoke shop, and they had cleared off a whole wall to make a vape area with mods and liquids and stuff like that. And I think today it's 2 walls now, but they still sell all the tobacco and everything too. But to me, and some people are like, oh my God, they sell tobacco too. No, that's meet them where they're at, meet them where they're at. And I think that's great. I think that's exactly what they should be, selling them in tobacco shops, selling. I'd love to, if I ever opened up a vape shop, it would be a tobacco harm reduction shop. It wouldn't just be a vape shop. It would have Zyn, and it would have snus, and it would have, anything that's lower risk than, just give them all sorts of different opportunities to see what works best for them. Because like I've told the story many times before, vaping did not work for my husband. He had to snooze along with the vaping before he was able to give up the cigarettes altogether. Something was missing from him. And I just, based on ECF conversations, that was the case for a lot more people than people like to admit, and it's that variety, that people need. And we were just talking about this before the show, is that tweet that I had responded to where the guy said, this is all Juul's fault. Nobody needs 5% nicotine. We all did it with 1.8 and got it down to 0.6. And, nobody needs that high of a stuff because we all did it. And that just really made me angry in a lot of ways. I mean, I can't say angry, but it just kind of like, really, you're going to go there, because if you say stuff like that, well, I did it this way, so everybody else should have done it this way. That's like people telling us, well, I quit smoking cold turkey, so vaping is just pointless. Nobody needs vaping. Or I quit with tobacco flavored vaping. Nobody needs peach mango. How are you going to go there? You can't. That variety is what makes this product worked for so many people. And that's the great thing about vape shops, is you'd have that wall, and you'd have the glass, underneath the counter was always all the mods and everything. And they'd have that little station with the zero nicotine stuff and little cover things that you could sit there and taste all the different flavors. And, that's exactly what made this work. All the variety and being able to go try stuff. Who's going to just go onto a website and be like, oh, unicorn puke sounds good. I mean?
Well, and I can't overstate how much like the community aspect of it helped me out. I mean, obviously, like it was like the hobby, it's new toys and trying new flavors, and it's exciting. But just the community, helping each other and steering everyone through it. I mean, the only silver lining, not only, but I mean, one silver lining to what's happening right now is maybe it will strengthen some of those old community ties that we used to have, the ECF stuff, where, if we're forced to be a little more underground or more black gray market stuff, maybe people will get a little bit tighter in the community, because that was really helpful back then. And then, obviously not saying Juul is a bad thing or anything, but when that got popular and other products and gas stations got popular, a lot of the newer vapors didn't have that community support because they just bought that and went about their day. And if it worked for them, great. But the community is what kept me like involved, and like definitely kept me from ever even wanting or thinking about going back to cigarettes.
Yeah. It's good to have that sort of almost informal accountability in a way, being around like-minded folks who are quitting smoking, and it's more support than accountability for sure. But I think, the next thing in my notes was about the vape meets to massive vaping conventions. We've all, I think, they're done, right? I mean, nobody's been to a vaping convention for a while now. At least in the United States, they're done. And so I don't know really where I wanted to go with this. I just know that I missed the earlier vape meets where it was, people setting up card tables and selling products that they had made. in their kitchens and so on. And then, over the period of like 3 years, maybe 5 years, you went from people renting a conference room at a hotel to renting out entire convention centers and pitching tents in the parking lot to accommodate the overflow, referencing ECC there. I don't know where I'm going with that, but that was also I know that you guys, I know Matt, you've been to more of these than
I mean, we were victims of our own success, right? So like those early vape meets, I came along later than Kristin or people like Graham and stuff, but some of the first few I went to were smaller and had that more community vibe. But you're right, it got a lot more corporate trade show feeling,
and no interest in those.
And I still liked going to them because you still got to see people that you knew from online,
That's a good part, yeah.
And like, so you still had that kind of community side of it, but times changed, and it wasn't underground anymore, and you had these just massive freaking vape shows in Vegas and California and stuff like that, and yeah, I mean, I missed those too. I wish we at least had more of something. I know there's still
there's going to be one. Mallory just said there's going to be one in Houston in October.
Yeah, the problem that I've seen over the last few years with vape shows in the U.S. is it's just gotten harder and harder to get vapors to come to them, and so it ends up just being more like trade shows. Like half the people walking the floor are just business owners looking for new products to pick up and stuff, and it's less and less consumers.
Yeah, that was the fun part, because in the early days we'd go to these things, and like Alex said, one conference room was like the size of what most people get for an average wedding, and all the booths were tables around the outer perimeter, and there's a bunch of tables in the center, and we'd all just sit and talk and meet, and it was definitely more like geared towards the consumer, and we would there's every booth table was like a different kind of product, and there was new stuff, there was, oh, look at those little rings you can put around your tank so they don't break, or look at that, that one is all a really cool cobalt blue color mod, and it just, wow, it was so much fun, and it was so much fun to, especially for CASAA, because we are all remote, we've been working remotely since the beginning. So we knew what this was all about with COVID, right? But we don't get a chance to see each other in person. I mean, actually, a lot of time we don't even get a chance to see each other's faces. I get, to do this with Logan and Alex now, and then Danielle comes out occasionally. But yeah, it was definitely there was definitely community, and I was so excited looking for it. I think the last one I went to was in Chicago, and actually went by myself, and my husband didn't come that time. And it was just, there was half-dressed women, which if you're a middle-aged woman, you're walking around, you're like, this is not geared towards me at all. It's all just, and if I was like a pave mom, I'd probably walk there and think, oh, they're all just trying to get these teenage boys vaping, because that's what it felt like. Again, same thing with the vape shop. Feels like we're a bunch of teenage boys would hang out. Is the couch, Alex, you said yours had a couch. The one you went to had a couch too. Is that like a prerequisite for opening a vape shop? I need to know this if I ever decide to open
you need a dusty old leather couch in a vape shop.
Couch, yeah.
It's actually, when you file it for a license in that jurisdiction, you have to state that you will put a nasty couch in there.
Yeah, so that last one, I just, and again, it was just the same stuff over and over again, as you went to this booth and you went to that booth and you went to that booth, and there was hardly anything unique, that it just wasn't the same. It didn't have that. To me, those early vape meets were like my vape shop, Alex. That was my community. That's where I saw Drew, and Drew's like, what the heck are you still doing with that 510? Here's a mod, take this, and he'd shove it in your hand and be like, you'll thank me later. And it was that kind of stuff where you learn stuff and you met people, and definitely that sense of community that, I haven't, it's hard to have that again. It's hard that I do miss that I really, really do miss those early days on ECF too. Like all the people from ECF we'd meet, and yeah.
Yeah, and well, for anybody who's kind of new to all the lingo here, ECF, Electronic Cigarette Forum, which is where a lot of us learned how to use the products online, where we didn't have vape shops. I was never a prolific poster on ECF, even wearing my CASAA hat. I never totally got into it, but there's a lot of information and a lot of people who are really willing to help. So.
Here's the link.
When I first started my YouTube channel, that's where I spammed all my videos in ECF. And then I'd get in trouble, but then I'd do it again. Thanks, ECF.
That's the link right there. It's e-cigarette-forum. It's still very active. CASAA has its own sub-forum. I post everything that I post on Facebook, on Twitter. CASAA's posting there. And they're still pretty active. That's, I think Facebook and Twitter kind of took over a lot, and a lot of people migrated away from there. But CASAA ended up doing that only because just the reach was greater. We were kind of talking to in an echo chamber in e-cigarette forum. You couldn't really share things the same way and stuff. So we did kind of get away from posting there, and I felt bad about that. And so that's why, I don't know, what was that, Alex? Maybe 2 years ago when I started posting there again and making sure. I don't know.
That sounds about right.
but I was like, boy, we haven't really done anything over there, and so we try to keep them, let them know what's going on. This video has been posted there, so hopefully some of you guys, if you're in DCF watching us, hi. So yeah, it's a good place to learn stuff. It really is, and I met a lot of people.
There's so much great history on there too. I mean, there's threads there's threads of guys designing atomizers, like the Genesis atomizer, just in a thread. Like there's all kinds of really cool stuff. When I first started, it was like mainly ECF, and then when Facebook came out with their groups, that really changed the game. And then everyone started migrating to Facebook groups, and people were selling in those groups and stuff too. But now Facebook's cracked down more on that stuff. So and maybe it'll migrate back to ECF at some point. Who knows?
Yeah. Here we go.
You never know.
Well, that maybe that'll bring us to the final bit of discussion, which was sort of the future, looking forward here. I guess, in my mind, I'm sort of taking the most pessimistic view here, that the regulations are enforced with an iron fist, and vape shops are sort of just put out of business. And so I guess what we're left with then is sort of the corporate version of what a vape shop or what a vapor retail experience is. And the example I use here is the IQOS store. And IQOS, PMI, and in the United States, Altria has the rights to market IQOS. Describe, this experience. I've only seen like videos of I've never been into an IQOS store. I'm just going off of the descriptions from the modified risk application that Altria submitted, and from pictures. I know Gregory Conley, I think, was sharing some pictures of an IQOS store and other things. And so apparently when you walk into an IQOS store, the entire sales process takes like 45 minutes. There's this interview of, how much do you smoke and what brand. And part of that is verifying that you do smoke. And part of their sales materials, or part of their marketing plan is to not sell IQOS to people who don't smoke. And I think that may even apply to people who may find themselves close to going back to smoking, which is something I publicly criticize them for in their TPSAC hearing. I don't feel that that's a very wise thing to do. But so if you don't smoke, you're not supposed to be able to buy an IQOS. They walk you through using the product. It's apparently, being in this store, it's a lot like being in an Apple store. It's a very technology-driven kind of environment. Some of the pictures from Japan, it actually feels more like a cafe. But here in the United States, I imagine it's a lot different. And after that, there are sort of, these follow-ups. I think after a day, they call you, or after a couple of days, they call you and see how you're getting along with the device, encouraging you to stick with that and not go back to smoking. But I certainly appreciate, I see the value of that, especially from a, talking to a regulator kind of perspective, including all of those details and really, building that as part of the marketing plan. I understand all of that. But first of all, the question is this kind of almost prescriptive, very managed experience that people might have with IQOS, is this the way of the future? If we do see vape shops survive, are they going to have to go through that process of spelling out what it's like to come in and buy a device? Are they going to have to commit to follow-ups with customers and all of these things? Is that the most effective way to do this?
I think the bummer is like, obviously the IQOS has helped lots of people and will help even more people. But, when you go into a place like that, you have one product to try. Yes, there's different flavors, but I've tried the IQOS before and various different sticks with it. And, if someone goes in there and they just don't like the experience, there's nothing else to try, So like, as opposed to a vape shop where, you don't, maybe you're trying a disposable and you don't like it, so you can give them something else to try it. And so I think that they're definitely going for the Apple shop or Apple store vibe. And I like, what they're doing. It makes sense, but does it replace a vape shop? No.
There's no black couch.
Yeah, there's no
well,
couch.
There might be. I don't know.
I mean, in all honesty, I always envisioned doing, if I ever, because before we finally got a vape shop, I always envisioned, hey, maybe I'll get into this, and I kind of envisioned something like an Apple store, something very clean, people with little lab little coats singing with my logo on it, very.
I love that. It's just if it had more variety.
Right,
I like the clean. Like if you look at a lot of the European vape shops, they definitely give me that vibe. A lot of white, very clean, sort of, trendy, minimalistic sort of.
Right.
But you still have lots of different products to choose from.
Right.
With the IQOS, you go in there, you're trying one system. Most people are probably going to buy it even if they don't like it, probably after going through that 45-minute spiel.
Well, I mean, it was successful in Japan. People are buying it in Japan. We've been spoiled though, because, over there they couldn't compare it to vaping. They couldn't compare it to all these. I mean, because I went from that one smoke shop, vape shop to now they're just popping up everywhere. I mean, we've got I still have to drive 2 hours, but I've got one in town now, and I could drive an hour in either direction to the bigger cities, and I've got dozens and dozens, and Japan didn't have that option. So you kind of have to step back and go, okay, well, what if vaping never existed? How would we feel about this? But we're kind of spoiled. Would we be sitting there fighting for the IQOS, and that option? Would we still be saying, this is saving our lives? So you kind of have to be a little honest with yourself on some of this, and think, well, why am I really doing this? Why am I really fighting for this? Am I fighting because it saves lives, or am I fighting because I really like it? I mean, you got to think about it that way too. Now, the whole thing, going through the whole 45 minutes. But I mean, I've spent an hour or two in a vape shop. I mean, it was voluntarily. I wasn't required to do it. So I don't know. And again, I don't know. That's hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a net positive thing. An IQOS store is a positive thing, and people should have access to it. It just doesn't replace what we're used to, like you said.
Yeah, I think, and Apathy Miller, I don't know if Apathy is your real first name, but if it is, congratulations. Points out here there is room for both, and I hope this is I'm putting this up in the right context, and I think everybody here agrees with that. I mean, whether we're talking about pharma vape or open tank systems and all of that, we actually want both. I want people to go to a drugstore and talk to the pharmacist and get a vapor product. I also want them to be able to go to a vape shop and see the wall, and make their decision. So, yeah, I think
funny,
Janine. Sounds like sitting through a presentation on timeshares.
Part of why vaping was so effective was because it had a leg up on smoking because it was more fun. I mean, the variety, the fun little devices, the toys, like I'm a tech guy, so getting a new mod was always fun, and trying new flavors was fun. And then obviously you had the community on top of that. You had, when you're just trying to make tobacco harm reduction the exact same as the cigarette experience, then it's you're gonna convert less people in the long run.
And
Yeah, I feel
vaping formed under a whole different. I'm sorry, Alex, but vaping formed under a whole different environment, in a whole different environment. I mean, we talked about ECF and how much innovation came from there, and people coming on and saying, where are the flavors? It was really consumer driven, whereas IQOS is top down driven, it's corporate driven, and they're like, well, what do we want to offer them, not what do they want from us? And again, if it was, I don't know how well it would have done, because the first time they tried to do a smoke-free cigarette, it didn't go so well, and so, yeah, I mean, we drove that, and that's what always made me so mad when they say, well, adults who smoke don't want flavors. Adults who smoke don't want something that looks like a Pokemon ball. Clearly they do, because it was adults who came up with all this crap, I mean, and they wanted it. I mean, I remember Julie, she had like every single mod that ever existed. Yeah. She like collected them.
I have Julie's collection here, and it's in a closet. I need to dig it out, but yeah, I believe one of them is like it's a kind of tall boy monster, made into a mod. So yeah.
I mean, all these things are user driven technologies, and like it's very frustrating. I wish that any regulator and any politician, before they make any rules on vaping, would comb through ECF, from the beginning, and just see kind of like the evolution of how it all went down. It's fascinating. And it was user driven. It was exactly what smokers were wanting.
Yeah.
And the different flavors, gosh, I remember people creating all sorts and then they were going into savory stuff. So you had like crab juice and pickle juice, and that never really picked up for me. But yeah, that always drove me crazy. Like, because because I was in my, I was 39 when I started. I'm in my 50s now, so I also all through my 40s, I was doing this, and I was trying different flavors and looking at, I bought this little thing because it's got the cool rainbow colors on it. I mean, and I'm 54. So this whole idea that, and my liquid is a berry melon citrus. So, I mean, this whole idea that we don't like gadgets. I mean, have they ever gone to an Apple store? Have they ever who's buying most of this tech? It's the people who actually have some money, who's buying the tech for their kids who want it. It's the people.
I mean, the U.S. is a consumerist society. Like, of course, we're going to want toys. That's how we were freaking raised.
This whole idea that we don't like this stuff, that grown adults aren't going to like the flavors or the cool tech or whatever. Never sat and watched a video of a guy with tweezers and blue fish filter material. I mean, it was grown adults doing that, not teenagers.
And it's important to point out, like some people in chat, like one person said, it makes me sad that you're saying were and was so hard to believe it could be over. That's not what we're saying here. It's just obviously we're going into like another chapter of how things could be. Maybe it reverts back to the old days more, where we all have to talk more on ECF so we can help each other find out how to, hey, look, there's this website and, wherever, and, everybody go buy their stuff because they're shipping. Maybe it gets to a point like that again, where we have to help each other out more to get the things that we want. So it doesn't mean like no one here is saying you're going to lose your vapes, 100%, but the times are changing clearly.
Yeah, I think, and to that point, I think there's a lot of value in having this conversation, and having it out in the open. I think looking at this from the perspective of researchers, policymakers, and the big companies that we can have some confidence are going to survive. I mean, even if this was just absolutely free market this and that, you would still see that market consolidation over time.
Yeah.
You know, different players are going to rise to the top, control certain regions of the country, or have, you know, be known for a particular product. And you know, there's tons of coffee houses all over the place. You know, Starbucks has not killed every single coffee house in the United States or the world, but they did,
have
of
a
course.
Starbucks here, so we're too small.
But they did have, you know, that effect in some places, and certainly, you know, there's a Starbucks almost everywhere except for Kristin's town. You know, but you know, because they have that, it's that brand consistency and awareness all over the place. And so, you know, part of this is speaking to those companies that are going to be able to capture a lot of market share because of the regulations. And I think, you know, I would hope that the bigger companies take a page from the little vapor playbook, which was to create a welcoming, inclusive space for anybody who smokes to walk into, find other people that are experiencing the same thing, and have just be able to have a normal, adult, level-headed conversation about switching away from smoking. I think that, you know, that's the point here, is that I want the regulators to see this. I want the researchers to get involved. I mean, there is some study, there is some research out there. I think it's a European study. Kristin, you probably know this, where they've, you know, looked at people who shop in vape shops versus folks who went to convenience stores, and they found that, you know, people who went to vape shops, they switched. They were more likely to switch completely, more likely to stay quit for, you know, longer, as compared to people who were shopping in convenience stores. We need more of that study. So again, I didn't want to do an obituary to the independent vapor side of things, more of just, I think really shining the light back onto where everything started. And, you know, there is a bit of that compare and contrast of, you know, small independent vapor shop versus the big corporate chains that we're at this point likely to see in the United States. And
there's a lot of shops. I mean, I don't know if Mark is still in the chat, but you know, he's a vape shop owner in Michigan, and he's not giving up. And we're hoping that you guys don't. You know, we can't tell you what to do. We can't tell you what's going to work. We can't tell you what's going to happen tomorrow. But there are people.
Not legal advice.
Right.
Nor is it business advice.
Oh, right. That microphone's not even working. I don't know.
No, it's not. It still worked. The effect worked. The effect was there. But what we're just trying to say is that there was a value to that, and this is what could be lost if everybody just starts giving up. You know, we see you out there. We want to acknowledge you. We want you to realize that we appreciate what you do. I mean, the CASAA got far more support from all the small businesses than they did any big companies over the years, especially in the early days. And we wouldn't still be here without you. We wouldn't be here without ECF. So we really do need you. You know, we want to see you succeed. We want to see you stick around, and we want the powers that be to understand what they're taking away, especially when they're not solving the supposed problem of youth vaping. And I mean, just the irony that the one thing that they want to see banned is the one thing that's probably going to get an approval, you know. So that, not approval, sorry, what's the term I'm looking for? Authorization. Thank you. They both start with A, so it throws me off. Yeah. So yeah, this is more of an ode to you, and it's more of making a point that vape shops have a place in this market. They have, they're a necessity. They, you know, how many people go, you can't buy a Juul and then walk back into the Quick Trip or at whatever corner gas station chain you have in your area and walk in there and say, hey, this stopped working. What can I do? You know, they're not going to be able to help you there. Well, you can buy another one, you know, that's, and then, well, no, just give me a pack of Marlboros. You know, it's, vape shops have a place, and they need to be there. And that's all we're kind of trying to point out, is what else is at risk of being lost that we need to keep fighting. If you're not doing those calls to actions, if you're not getting more people to join CASAA and other advocacy groups, And if you're not supporting your local vape shop, because they've been supporting you all these years, that's something to think about. It's something to think about. And I see the comments are going crazy, so I need to go see what others.
Yeah, sorry, I took over. I dropped a little note there about recycling, which is another thing that some vape shops offer. A very important element to all of this, especially as we move towards the single-use products, as Logan likes to say. That you know, some vape shops will happily take those and help you with recycling. Not all of them. I know that there's a lot of barriers to just simply understanding where to recycle things. There's no uniform thing to point people to for recycling batteries. You kind of have to do your own research in your own town, and even that's kind of difficult. But
well, and that's where education comes into play again too, though. Like, if a vape shop will sell a disposable, but you know, and I say this because I do some disposable reviews, I think disposables fit good use cases. They're good for a newer vapor that just wants to dip their feet in the water and see if they like vaping or not. It's good for somebody that doesn't want to take their more expensive gear with them on a trip, or like when we go out to the lake, I'll use a disposable sometimes. So they're not all good or all bad, but like, if a vape shop that sells disposables will try to migrate somebody, or at least say, hey, these are your options. You can use a refillable product and save money. There's less waste. But if all we're left with is smoke shops and mini marts, they're just going to have these on the counter and never give people any direction at all.
Yeah, I always thought it was a shame that vape shops didn't sell those things. I mean, they should sell the gamut.
They do more and more now.
They do now, yeah. But in the beginning, they wouldn't. And they're like, I'm not going to sell that crap. It's like, that helped a lot of people, and that might get them started. I mean, that's how I got my 70-year-old aunt to finally do it. Is we were at a Walmart, and there was a Enjoy Kings, which were the ones that kind of were soft and squishy, feeling like a cigarette. And I said, you know, those are supposed to be really cigarette-like. And she's just like, okay, throw it on there. And she bought it. And then she's like, well, it's too bad you can't recharge it. So it's like, oh, I think I got her. Then we got her a rechargeable version. And then then after that, not even a month after that, she walked into that vape shop and bought that mod.
It's a good stepping stone product.
She never
for sure.
smoked again.
If you know, somebody doesn't want to make a big investment right away on a refillable kit, you know, you spend $10 or which, depending on what disposable it is, and they can at least get their feet wet and decide if they like it.
I'm just going to answer Jim's question. We have seen it, and if you look at our blog, it's actually in this week's blog. We have the video from the Forbes, Steve, and we also have Amanda Wheeler's great video too, which we were going to talk about with this in this sort of segment.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I kind of glossed over it because as we were talking about it before, I was watching GTNF live when she spoke, and of course jumped in with everybody else giving well-deserved props on Twitter and social media. It is an excellent speech. She did a wonderful job. I'm not going to rehash it or even quote it here other than to say regulatory arson is what we're all experiencing. But for sure, anybody who hasn't seen it, it's being shared around. Just look up Amanda Wheeler on Twitter, and I'm sure you'll find a link.
You don't even have to do that. It's on our website.
Oh, yeah, you can just go to our blog.
Yeah, go to here. I'll show you. Where is it?
Sorry, I'm horrible at this job.
Wait, let me pull this up. I will show you guys right here on our blog. Wait, let me get rid of this.
She got the cover photo.
Yeah, we gave her the cover photo. And if you to get there, basically you go to CASAA.org. Danielle, who's in the chat, beautiful website. We're always talking up your website, Danielle. So click blog. And then if you just scroll down, you'll see all of our past issues, but she's right there on the top. Click on that. And then just scroll down and you'll see both Danielle's new thing, a lot of the stories we talked about today. And then down here, I swear to God, there's the Steve Forbes one right there. That was a really good one. That's one that kind of gets you to stand up and cheer. And then there's Amanda's right there. So you can play it right from within our blog. So you don't have to go digging around trying to find it.
So yeah, anybody who hasn't seen it, Amanda Wheeler is an excellent communicator and very, very as active as one can possibly be in this whole space. And her keynote speech at GTNF is very highly recommended.
I mean, yeah.
And the other, the context for that, that's something else we were talking about before the show. And we will be wrapping this up. We're coming up on 2 hours. Yes. But the context there and a lot of the value of her speaking at this event is it is attended by people from incumbent tobacco companies all over the world. There's a lot of vapor people. There's some researchers. There's some policy people that are there. But that really was an opportunity for Amanda to stand up on behalf of both, consumers and small businesses in the vapor space and speak truth to power. That room is filled with lots of money and lots of power on the incumbent tobacco side of things. And I know that, folks that work in these companies are aware of all of this stuff. And yeah, at the end of the day, being accountable to shareholders and all of that means that you've kind of got to go where the money is, even if that means crushing your competition. But as these companies are putting the focus back on, I think, repairing their brand image and also taking this opportunity to do some good in the world and clean up the mess that some of them made, it is absolutely important that people like Amanda Wheeler are given the platform to speak. And she did an absolutely excellent job of doing that. So thank you, Amanda, and thank you anyone for going out to watch that. And with all that having been said, do we have any closing thoughts from around the panel? Do you think we covered everything? Did we solve?
I gave the only decent thoughts I have already.
we tapped Matt out for his thoughts today.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just drained. I don't know what else good to say. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Amanda's, it's just one of those things where you just want to stand up and cheer. And she really did it right. You see a lot of advocates coming out there just screaming about conspiracies and big tobacco and it's this guy's fault. Is that? And she really fielded those questions really nice. She was very diplomatic.
Yeah, stick around for the Q&A.
Yeah, the Q&A. She didn't throw anyone under the bus. She kind of made her point, her feelings known about the guy from the FDA who was speaking. I would have loved to have been at the after thing when she said, "Talk to me after about that." But yeah, she just she just has done so much. She's just been tireless. And I think that's pretty much what I wrote in the tweet about her. And yeah, we just everything that she's done, and she's a good example, to advocates too. So
she's one of those that's a good example of what I was saying earlier about reading the room, because I've seen her talk to Democrats and Republicans, and she's very good at fitting in with both. She can go, schmooze up to Lauren Bieber crazy. Sorry. But then also schmooze up to a Democrat and speak their language. She's really good at reading the room and giving effective arguments.
Yeah,
for sure. All right.
I'm going to throw the blog link into the thing for people who may need to see it. So
all right. Well, on the warm fuzzy love fest there, I figure that's probably a good spot to end it. So I'm going to try to do Logan's spiel here at the end. Thank you everyone in the chat. Thank you everyone who's watching at home, and especially thank you to the folks who are watching in vape shops all across the country. I know Mark usually has these on. Thank you, Mark, for poking your head up in chat. And you can catch this. You can catch the replay on all the places where you get all the podcasts. We usually just limit it to the legislative rundown. But of course, this is also available here on our YouTube channel. I know I'm going to screw this up. I just take it for granted that Logan's always going to be here, so I haven't quite memorized his speech at the end here. The time zones. We're on 4:30 Eastern, 1:30 Pacific. Everything in the middle, you have to do your own math.
3:30 Wisconsin, in that area.
I feel like we have somebody from the Mountain Time zone here. I feel like we're leaving yet. So it's 2:30 Mountain Time.
Yep.
We got that.
Don't forget about the best place in the country.
2:30
Mountain Time Zone.
Mountain Time Zone. It's if you live in the best place in the country, CASAA Live is on 2:30 where you live in the afternoon on Saturdays. Be sure to follow us on all the social medias: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, CASAA Media, and join your state groups. Join your CASAA state groups. We have a dedicated group of volunteers who keep those updated, monitor them, keep out the ruffians and the spammers, and make sure that the relevant calls to action, which are going to be pretty light, state specific for the rest of the year here. But a good thing to promote that and get involved now, because we expect the wave of legislation against synthetic nicotine, continuing flavor bans at the state and local level to bring us into 2023 and beyond. Lots of people out there trying to go around FDA's authority here, even though FDA is pretty well screwing this job up. I think I got all the things. Like and share.
Yes, please share this video. Like it, share it, sign up for notifications, and be sure to what do you
subscribe?
Think? Oh, yeah.
I'm just doing the animations that go along with what you're saying. So
subscribe.
I click the subscribe. There you
go. You said about follow us on Twitter and join your Facebook group, but make sure you join CASAA. A lot of people think that they're part of CASAA because they follow us on Facebook or Twitter, or they come watch this, but you need to go to the actual website and join CASAA. Add your name to these numbers. The more numbers we have, the more we can impress people saying, hey, we represent this many people, and that opens more doors. So we need you to officially join, get your family to join, and it doesn't matter if they vape or not, because it's all about, it's absolutely free. We do not spam you. I'll be, sometimes you might get a thank you email, but mostly it's about calls to actions and stuff like that. If you're, please donate. We can't do this without you. We're very much grassroots on a shoestring budget. So if you can spare a couple bucks a month, you can sign up to just a couple bucks a month. Maybe
if you don't have a Starbucks in your town like Kristin, then you're saving all that coffee money, and that can be a nice donation to CASAA every month.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, because and do remember that Alex and I are the only employees. People like Matt and Danielle and Julie and Jim and everybody else, they do all this as volunteers. They're putting in their time and their talent. So whatever you can do to help us out, like I said, we're very grassroots. Some people think we're bigger than we are. Like, why aren't you hiring lobbyists and taking out multi-million-dollar ads? It's like, we're just trying to keep lights on. So if you guys, just so you understand that, and please come back, invite your friends. If you own a vape shop, we love that that Mark puts us up on his vape shop while he's in there, and he says his customers love it. So that'd be great if you could do that too. But hopefully we'll see you next week. Well, I might not see you next week. I've got something I'm doing next week, so you might see a different face next week.
I'll start the rumor. We may approach Jim McDonald to see if he wants to come on next week in your absence. So, and special thanks to Matt for coming on. This was short notice. Thanks for spending part of your Saturday with us, and all the insights and talent and stuff you bring, not just to this program, but to CASAA. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Always happy to fill in. Always happy to fill in when Logan leaves you high and dry.
That's great. All right, you guys. I think that's all the thanks. And again, thanks, Matt. And come by next week. You never know what you're going to see.
All right.
Have a good night. Bye.